Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink, I have in sample form, and it's from Private Reserve, Invincible Black. I will debate many things about that title. I believe it's Private Reserve's permanent black ink, or their version of it. Yeah. There's that. The two pens I used were these. This is a JinHao 250. It's got a very normal, medium nib. It's a number 5 nib. And, yeah, I mean, it's not wet, not dry, not scratchy, not broad, not fine. It's very... And I, for a while, was considering using just this to test it because it's so medium, but because it's a permanent ink, I decided I should probably also use something a little gentler with it. Now, this is a Nemosine Singularity with a 0.6 stub, if my camera will ever focus. And it's actually pretty dry writing, or it was when I did the tests. So I thought that would be my, going easy on it pen. Now, as this swatch might inform you, it's gray. It looks like those, have you ever seen those, refillable things where you get the big sticks of graphite and you put it in the holder and it's, that's what it looks like. It looks like graphite, or if you, have ever gone to an art store and they've got the, almost like the same as pastels of the graphite. That's what this is. It's matte and it's gray and it is not black, but I thought I'd try and compare it to a couple of things. Here's another gray, Diatramentus Scented Frankincense, which is a little bit lighter and a little more blue-gray, but still. Graf von FaberCastell's Stone Gray, which you can see actually has some elements of green in it, some elements of purple, and is actually darker. Noodler's Bernanke Black Quick Dry Black Ink, darker. Gerabon's Pearl Noir, which is their black ink, definitely way darker. Noodler's Dark Matter, which I didn't like personally, had some issues with it, and I thought it wasn't a true black, and yet compared to this, it is so very, very black. Diamine's Onyx Black, which I've heard is not even Diamine's darkest black ink, and for some reason on here, on the swatch paper was sheening like whoa, but anyways, much darker. And then Noodler's Borealis Black, which makes this look like a fluffy cloud. So yeah. Now, to debate the invincibleness, I thought I'd see what it could hold up against. Water really didn't do much. I was scrubbing it until the paper started to come apart, but it did move a little. 1/3 bleach solution started to break it up a bit, but it took some effort. Ammonia pen flush kind of got it moving, but not a whole lot. Hydrogen peroxide actually really started to loosen up and get it moving, which was kind of surprising, but yeah. Now, chromatography. Let me see. I think these were just the two different pens, so yeah. Here's how you're supposed to do it. And this is weird. I hope the camera will pick this up. This is pink. Down at the bottom where the initial drop was put, there's pink in there. And then there's this very solid wall of black, which is funny because all the writing is gray. And then, eventually it stops. But where the water stops is where the ink stops. Now, I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it. But here, it didn't move at all. And the water stopped right about here. And I doubt this will show up on camera, but there's like a haziness to it. It's barely there. But yeah, so that was interesting. Paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. It is so very gray and so very matte. It's has like the texture of a nail file or something. It's grainy. But yeah, that 0.6 stub took 5 seconds to dry. That medium took 12. You can tell that it's pretty saturated. It never looks thin, it never looks undersaturated. Private Reserve rarely does. But it's very gray. And there's no spread, there's no feathering, but there were spots of like show through. I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but there were areas where you get hints of something across the back, and a few of them. And yeah, those came through before the water test, which was somewhat disturbing. But yeah, yeah, well behaved that there's no, you know, feathering or any of that stuff, no spread, but that was worrisome. There, you can see that something moved, and here, sort of when you look at this versus that, it gets a little bit more grayer. The page actually has a bit of a haze to it, but it didn't feather, it didn't explode. It's definitely there, definitely readable, definitely dark. Next up is Fabriano paper, 85 grams per square meter. Definitely gray. Definitely still kind of a matte texture, but it does sort of start to get almost shiny matte, which sounds contradictory, but I don't know, there's like a sheen, not a sheen, but like a shimmer or something. It's I don't know, it's like a heavily varnished walnut cabinet or something. It glares. But yeah, that 0.6 stub took 7 seconds. That medium took 15. Again, you can tell that there's plenty of saturation in there. Yeah, it goes on black. The ink looks black when you put it down. But as it dries, it just gets grayer and grayer. So, and the flow was 5.5 out of 10, which was perfect, because I didn't have to fight it out of the pens, and in this fairly dry 0.6 stub, it just went. I didn't have to, you know, fight with it too much. Easy going. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no sheen. Maybe there's some echo in that scrubby, but I was laying it on pretty thick, trying to make sure I got that shiny. But, yeah, again, here, you can see that something was moved, and here you can see it got a little bit lighter, and there's a bit of a haze. And by comparison, but I mean, didn't feather, didn't explode, still pretty dark. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where there were problems, but it was along the edge of the paper, so I think it's just, you know, from where it was in the block, and even there, it's super localized. So yeah, but anyways, that 0.6 stub took 5 seconds. The medium took 14. You do get, I don't know, maybe a tiny bit of shading, which personally I don't like in my black inks. But since this is mostly a gray, I'll go with it. Yeah, it's just so, man. Besides here, there's no feathering. There's not really any bleed. You maybe start to see some, like, something. But I mean, this is a semi-permanent ink, so something to be aware of. And, oh, there's no more of that shine on here, but again, here you can see that something was made to move. And here you can, I feel like you can probably definitely see that little bit of haze and that the slightly different color, but it didn't feather, didn't explode, didn't do crazy stuff. It's very clear, very dark, very there. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out dry times, which it did. And for bringing out shading and sheen, it did not bring out any shading. In fact, on here there is no shading. None. But it did bring out that shine. Because it is shiny all across here. Like every letter is shiny. It's not just the scrubby. So that was kind of odd. But on here, again, it's definitely a dark, dark gray. It looks like those sticks of graphite. But yeah, the 0.6 stub took 11 seconds, which is pretty much double where it was anywhere else. And that medium took 20, which oddly wasn't that big of a leap. But yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread. There might be some echo, but this is a fairly dark ink, and a kind of aggressive one. And this is super thin paper, but even still, I think it's mostly in the scrubby, so yeah. And this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add more water, and it sort of did, in comparison to the other papers anyway. You can definitely see that something moved. And here you can too, but that's really there. It's really dark. It didn't do anything crazy. It didn't even dye the page all that much. So, yeah, it's pretty permanent. Now for the next 3 tests, I just used that 0.6 stub, except to write the name. Here is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, where it is definitely gray, and it still has that matte texture. It's almost woolly. But yeah, there is no shading. Half a second to dry. There's spread. There's definitely spread. The line width got broader. Yeah. There's feathering. it's just, it's not great. And then there's this. And again, this is the smallest stub I have. And it's probably, when I was writing these tests, it was pretty darn dry. And we still get all of this, which is not encouraging. But again, this is a permanent ink. It's probably pretty aggressive. But yeah, absorbent paper tends to suck ink in, make it harder to wash out. And yet you can kind of make out, not super easily, that something was moved. And actually here, there's not that huge of a difference in color, or I guess I should say darkness. But this paper tends to do funny stuff when you add water. It tends to feather and explode and do stuff like that. Here, we don't have that. Didn't do any of that. You can't even see really where it dyed the page. Not bad. Now this is Mead Notebook Paper. It's physically thinner than 20-pound copier paper. And usually, lately, it outperforms the 20-pound paper, but here not so much. There's not as much spread, but there is some. Still very matte. Very woolly looking, still 0.5 seconds to dry, still definitely a gray. Could be worse. Yeah, there's a tiny bit less feathering. It's mostly just like a woolliness. Then there's this. You get a lot of echo. I don't think it's anywhere near as noticeable as with the 20-pound where you get more obvious spots littered throughout. But yeah, if you're really picky to that and you have to write on both sides compulsively, this is probably not going to be ideal for you. But water test, you can see that something moved, but here it's less obvious. It's still very dark, very clear, very there. And this paper tends to freak out when you add water. It really didn't do that here. See, there's no feathering, no exploding, no weird colors shooting off in weird directions. Now, lastly is Moleskine paper, which I hate because it hates ink. I'm seriously considering not testing it anymore. Leave a comment down below on your opinion for that. Here you almost get shading, but it's still it's so woolly. I really wish I could get this texture on camera. It's really kind of nasty looking. It's feathery and it's just icky. 2.5 seconds to dry. And then there's this, the back. And I mean, I guess it could be worse. But there are these little dots everywhere, and okay, that was human error, but it's... Now, that, you can barely tell that something moved. You can kind of, if you focus really hard. And this paper tends to really do weird stuff when you add water. Here it didn't so much, comparatively. It did sort of start to intensely woolify. Looked like maybe if I was like more aggressive with it, maybe it would feather, but yeah, that's not too bad, right? For Moleskine, except for the bleeding and all that, but and the texture, but anyways, there you go. For your consideration, Private Reserve Invincible Black. It's actually a gray. Very much a gray. Has this weird, like, matte texture. It can be a little aggressive. Be careful with it. And I recommend you just use a heck of a lot of water to clean it out of your pens. But yeah, it is pretty invincible. And even on the absorbent papers, where oftentimes it tends to freak out, pretty sane. So yeah, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.